fintech can unlock capital, expand markets, and improve regional competitiveness with real transformation demands, public-private partnerships, strong governance, effective cybersecurity systems, and smart investments to ensure that no one is left behind. Now, our expert panel will explore how the region can leverage fintech to improve financial inclusion and drive inclusive growth. We'll discuss practical strategies to minimize disruption, expand access to financing, and create opportunities for all. Welcome to Fintech, finding the balance between disruption and creation, a conversation that could shape the future of Caribbean finance. The transformation starts now.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Caribbean Development Bank's seminar on FinTech, Finding the Balance Between Disruption and Creation. I'll be presenting brief opening remarks this morning. The Caribbean Development Bank recognizes the valuable role that FinTech, the application of digital technology to financial services, can play in building resilient Caribbean economies. FinTech is already transforming the Caribbean's economic and social landscape by facilitating integration efforts and creating opportunities for our women, youth, disabled, and indigenous communities by expanding market access and increasing the economic participation of the region's entrepreneurs, households, and corporations. Despite these advances, however, many, and especially in marginalised and rural areas, continue to be excluded from the financial technology space because of affordability constraints, gaps in digital skills, and uneven infrastructure. Accelerating the uptake of FinTech and addressing inequities in access will be important for promoting the productivity and competitiveness needed to drive and foster sustainable growth, create better jobs, and bridge inequalities, particularly across the urban-rural divide and in marginalized communities. How can FinTech improve intra-regional trade and connectivity? Last year, at our 54th annual meeting, the Caribbean Development Bank spoke about the need to integrate agile processes and digital systems to support regional trade facilitation and connectivity. 2 weeks ago, the Central Bank of Barbados and the Bahamas activated a landmark cross-border local currency payment via a digital payment system. The CARICOM payment and settlement system facilitated this transaction. This system can support the region's aim to reduce its reliance on foreign exchange as intermediary currencies that often challenge inter-regional trade. This is one of the immediate gains achieved by integrating policy updates with modern technology to increase trade and connectivity in the region. FinTech also offers a gateway for the region's unbanked and underserved communities to participate in the financial system by using modern payment systems. Payment systems supported by FinTech can address existing barriers to financial inclusion, such as information asymmetry and cost barriers. For the Caribbean, we recognize that a successful FinTech agenda can help the region provide financial services at a cheaper cost and with greater access for our populations. In this way, FinTech will help to build an ecosystem where many more can participate and all can benefit. The rapid and extensive adoption of digital technologies alongside increased connectivity is driving the development of FinTech in the global economy. In Africa, mobile money has dramatically changed the continent's delivery of financial services. In Asia, FinTech has expanded beyond payment systems to include lending, insurance, and investment. And in Europe, the financial system has advanced efforts to innovate and to regulate activities in FinTech. Right here in Brazil, PIX, the Brazilian instant payment scheme, processed a record 63.4 billion transactions in 2024 at a value of 4.6 trillion United States dollar. Interestingly and importantly, when PIX first started in 2021, person-to-person transactions accounted for almost 80% of all transactions. 4 years later, there has been a dramatic increase in person-to-business transactions from 10% to 41% of all transactions. In the Caribbean, central banks are already integrating digital payments with platforms such as the Bahamas Sand Dollar, Barbados M-Money, Jamaica Jamdex, and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's Dcash, generating a lot of activity. CDB has actively lent support to this digital transformation in partnership with the International Finance Corporation. Both partners assisted in financing training to accelerate digital innovation across Caribbean financial institutions. CDB is committed to continuing this partnership. While we move ahead with the Fintech agenda, the approach to implementing Fintech in the region must be a balanced and strategic one that considers the risks and potential challenges of the technology. These challenges require targeted strategies to help the region absorb the benefits of technology. We cannot overlook the importance of making ourselves technology ready, technology aware, and technology efficient. For the region to become technology ready, we must invest in infrastructure and bandwidth to support Fintech penetration to unserved and underserved communities. These communities need to be trained to engage in the modern marketplace. This requires increased digitalization and a democratization of technology to ensure access and inclusion. For the region to become technology aware, we must protect the population from the various security and privacy concerns that accompany the digital space. For this reason, authorities must design, strengthen, and implement timely and modern data governance, standards, and security. These steps are necessary to support the decentralization of and data needs for the Fintech agenda. For the region to become technology efficient, the ecosystem needs to engage with all actors to achieve scale and performance efficiency. To do this, we, along with the private sector, public sector, and donor community, must be partners in development. We must align, partner, and act to maximize the benefits and minimize the disruptions to transform our economy sustainably, inclusively, and proactively. Today, we hear more on how Fintech can serve as a critical tool for accelerating innovation, resilience, transformation, and for reducing poverty in our region. From industry experts before us, our three esteemed panelists in implementing a cohesive and harmonious financial technology space in the Caribbean. We will also hear about the successes and the potential partnerships that can support the implementation of Caribbean's Fintech agenda. Our session this morning will be moderated by Mr. Dindil Ramratan, staff of the CDB's Economics Department. Our panelists for this session are Mr. Timothy Antwine, the third governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank since February 2026. Previously, for 14 years, he served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance of the Government of Grenada. Then we have Ms. Lilia Burunchik. Lilia is the World Bank Director for Caribbean countries. Prior to joining the World Bank, Ms. Burunchik was a deputy governor of the National Bank of Moldova, Moldova's central bank. And finally, we will also hear from Dr. Angelo Duarte. Mr. Duarte is Chief of Staff for the Deputy Governor's Office of the Central Bank of Brazil. Previously, he served as the head of the Central Bank's Competition and Financial Market Structure Development. I now hand over proceedings to the session's moderator. Thank you all.
Hi, thanks. Partnership in action. Welcome, and as Barbados's national hero said, that Rihanna I'm speaking about, this is what you came for. So at least let me pretend for the next hour and a half. As we start today, I would like to remind you of a saying that will soon be very common. Time and technology waits on no one. When we think about the transition we've seen because of technology in areas like music, like sports, it has changed how we do and how we react to what we receive. We think about the transition from 8-track and vinyl records to cassettes and CDs, and now to streaming. It has changed how we produce music, how we consume music, and how we share music. At the bedrock of what we're doing today, when we speak of financial technology, we are going to speak about how we change what we do when it comes to our most basic transaction, consumption. Consumption of anything requires that we are able to trade in a marketplace efficiently, effectively, and timely. I want to mention just last week that the Barbados Central Bank reported a decrease in the demand for physical cash. Now, we aren't fully in the fintech revolution, but when we think about what credit cards, what those type of payment systems did to how we use and how we pay, the technology is already making us change. So today will be about a next step in this evolution and seeing how we go forward. So my first question would go to Lilia in terms of seeing how this technology revolution is defining us. And in giving your opening remarks, what are you seeing from the field about the main opportunities that are coming towards us as a region and a development community?
Is it working? Yeah, it's working. Good morning, everyone. We live in a very interesting world and a different world, a world that is changing very rapidly. I remember when I started my career, most payments were made in cash. And today you just need, in many countries, not everywhere, you just need your phone. And you can pay with your phone and in different ways. The Brazil system was mentioned with the PIX, which it's a revolution, but we've seen this type of revolutions in some other parts of the world as well. So technology is changing our life and is making our life much easier. And we, as development partners and as representative of various institutions in this room, we can play a very important role in this. We can play an important role in engaging with the governments in creating the basis for introducing these new technologies, for revolutionizing how we conduct transactions, how we actually support development. First, it's revolutionizing the services that the government is providing to the citizens, and this is what some of the programs that we are implementing are doing. In the Caribbean, you still have a lot of government services that are paper-based. I think today is the chance for us to change this. And we do see quite a lot of changes in many countries in terms of switching to new electronic digital systems. We are also revolutionizing how transactions are being done for regular citizens between the private sector, the providers of services, and the citizens and customers. We're revolutionizing how citizens are getting financial services. Have you tried to open bank accounts recently? Maybe even not recently. It took me 2 weeks to open an account with lots of paperwork. So how can we expect everybody to have the time, to have the knowledge, to actually have the stamina to actually open the account? That's why, That's why the new technologies and the financial inclusion possibilities that these new technologies are creating are changing the way we get access to financial services. We get the possibility of transacting in a much simpler way. And finally, what I wanted to say, and there are many more things I would like to say during this panel, but what I wanted to say is infrastructure is so important in this regard, and making sure that everybody has access to internet services. I'm participating in these annual meetings with great interest, but in parallel, I still have my job to do, and I have meetings that I have to attend. Even here in this hotel, my internet connection hasn't been perfect, so we really depend on very good infrastructure to be able to provide efficient services and to actually enable the fintech services and the whole fintech innovations to happen. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. I think you really touched on the key point there. It's about doing what we've been doing better. And we're trying to recognize where the technology could help us improve. I will now pass to Governor Antoine, and I'm sure he had perfect remarks planned to open up, but we ambushed him because we found out about CAPS a week ago, and we said, Gov, your opening remarks has to be to bring this great news to the region.
That's how it should be, agile and focused. I have no problem with that. Let me just start by thanking CDB for putting this particular issue of fintech on this agenda. I think it's very important because fintech has real potential, and it's already starting to do that with respect to closing the digital divide, really increasing advancing financial inclusion, and boosting economic growth. And if I may say so, Mr. President, this topic agenda aligns beautifully with the new mantra of the CDB. Innovate, transform, thrive. Just checking to see if you're on with the program. Very good. So you ask about CAPS. So here's the thing. At least 90% of all payments in the Caribbean right now are denominated in US dollars. What that means is foreign exchange costs, but perhaps equally challenging is the over-reliance on correspondent banks to be able to do business in the region. And we know from experience the possibilities, the realities of unilateral termination and sudden stops. We've had to deal with those issues. Most of the trading that goes on within CARICOM right now is in US dollars. So what is CAPS? CAPS is the CARICOM payments and settlement system that has two objectives. One, to create a real-time, low-cost, cross-border payment system in local currencies. That essentially means that you avoid the use of correspondent banks. So the primary objective, so that's the value proposition of CAPS. The primary objective is to boost trade and transfers, including remittances, within CARICOM, and secondly, to build and boost trade and investments between CARICOM and Africa. CAPS is modeled on PAPS. PAPS is the Pan-African Payment Settlement System. And I want to acknowledge Afrexim Bank for the work that they've done, the bank has done with respect to advancing PAPS, which is what we are leveraging to bring CAPS to CARICOM. And I see at the back of the room the Chief Operating Officer for the Caribbean, Mr. Oke, who is here with us, and I want to acknowledge you and the work that you're doing in this very important area. So here's what happened. African Exim Bank came to the Central Bank governors about 2.5 years ago. There's a committee of Central Bank governors that falls obviously under the Caribbean community. And we agreed to begin a journey of exploration to see how we could partner in this area. They had set up PAPS in Africa with central banks since 2022, and now we wanted to leverage that. So that is exactly what we've done. So as you heard from Christine and from Dinel, A few weeks ago, two central banks, Central Bank of Barbados and Central Bank of Bahamas, actually successfully completed a proof of concept with respect to caps. So we know it works technically. And what we want to do next is really pursue a pilot, which is to say, bring additional central banks on board, at least two others for the initial pilot. So the first two, Barbados and Bahamas, two others, ECC will probably be one of those, and to actually do a real-life pilot of what that works. So remember what it is. Real-time, low-cost, cross-border in local currencies. And settlement is, when they did the proof of concept, was about within 20 seconds. I'm not going into the details of how it works, but essentially, if I'm sending money from Eastern Caribbean, from St. Kitts, where I'm based, to Barbados, I send EC dollars. I'm sending to you, Ramnara, you will get it in Barbados dollars. Behind the scenes, there will be a net settlement in US dollars between the two central banks and with PAPS acting as the settlement agent. So that's behind the scenes. But you are not dealing with any foreign exchange issues. You don't have to pay wire transfers and all of these costly arrangements that we have now. So think of that, what that could do for our region in terms of trade, small businesses. Think of what it could do for our trade between Africa. If my child is at Caville, I could send her money directly, EC dollars, which she can get in Beijing. And if she happens to want to go and do a semester in Ghana, for example, I can do the very same thing, eventually. So that is what, in a nutshell, the CARICOM payment and settlement system is about. There are many, many benefits we see, not just in terms of moving money faster and cheaper, less reliance on correspondent banks, but also boosting small, medium enterprises, SMEs, which is a key part of how we drive growth and employment in our region. So I'll stop here with that little initial intro on CAPS. And again, to say to you that we are very keen now to move that forward. And let me say this finally, on this first point. I verily believe that the payment system should work for all except illicit actors. I feel that deeply in my bones. Except illicit actors. So we have to do all within our power to make it faster, cheaper, and safer for our people to be able to transact with payments, investments, which is the lifeblood of our economies. I'll leave it there.
Thanks and congratulations on CAPS. And well done trying to pronounce my name. I think we'll move past the pilot before we get there. So now we move to Dr. Duarte. And we just heard about the pilot and how we're pushing forward in the region with payment systems. You are bringing an experience of having done it, having gotten it to work, and now you are even innovating the innovation. So I think your opening remarks in this regard on taking us to that new frontier, we really welcome. So you may go ahead.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, the Caribbean Development Bank, for inviting me to discuss all very interesting things in this panel. When I received the invitation, I was wondering about what lessons from our experience could be relevant to the Caribbean countries, jurisdictions, and considering that, let's say, the population of Caribbean countries, of any of those jurisdictions, used to be lower than 1% of Brazilian population. We have countries of different dimensions and what can be useful. And in fact, I concluded that technology, exactly that could be applied in a large jurisdiction such as in Brazil, could also be applied in a small country, because technology is the way to offer services, financial services, to the population at very low cost. This is exactly the challenge that we faced in the past. We still, let's say, working on this. This is something that never ends, and also probably the Caribbean countries are facing. The second point related to technology is that technology can be transplanted from one country to the other. We know that each jurisdiction has its own regulation, own preferences, laws and so on. But in fact, it's much cheaper sometimes to adapt the technology to the regulatory framework of each country than create new things. And I think a second point that could be relevant for you, it's related to cross-border payments. Now, I remember that reading all these BIS papers that difficult of the corresponding banking model for the Caribbean countries once many banks has refrained to operate with those countries. And also in Brazil we had a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties with cross-border payments in the past. The costs was very high. A lot of people when traveling abroad has to buy a US dollar cash or euro cash and so on. And we see that in 10 years we transformed completely this landscape of cross-border, and almost everybody traveling abroad using cards issued by fintechs, and this is important. This transformation was led by fintechs, Brazilian and foreign ones. And also now you can, let's say, make a purchase something using those Asian platforms of e-commerce, paying in Brazilian reais, and you do not have to concern about exchange rate fluctuations. So I think that I know that cross-border payments is relevant in our jurisdictions, and from our experiences, fintech technology is something that improved a lot our experience in making cross-border account payments. A third point that I would emphasize in this introduction that came up in my mind to listen to Lilian is the role of the government. The role of the government is not only to, let's say, to create an environment to innovation, to fintechs, or even to regulate fintechs and so on, but not also this, but also moving the services of the government to the to digital, making the government services digital. In this, in Brazil, the whole of let's say the job of the central bank was made it easier when the government decided to pay the benefits, the social benefits, using the financial system network. And so everybody, if you are entitled to receive a beneficial social benefit from the government, you're going to receive a card, or you're going to a bank account or a fintech account will be open under your name, and so you can use a card or can use the fintech or the bank app to make payments and so on. So this is very important to financial inclusion. Okay. Otherwise, people go to the bank branch and to the ATM and withdraw all money and use cash. A second thing that was very important in Brazil in terms of digitalization was the creation of a platform of services, of government services by internet. The e-gov, I'm not responsible for this and I'm not expert on this, but it's worth knowing this platform that you can do almost everything, our relationship with the government concentrated in a platform, in a digital platform. For example, you can access this platform and know all the bank accounts open in your name, because sometimes someone get your documentation and open a fraudulent bank account, then you can access just one example of services and access if there are loans under in your name, if you are the bank accounts in your name, and so on. So I will stop here and be prepared to the next questions.
Thank you very much. I must say this is the best behaved panel I ever had, and everybody on time. So we're running smoothly. I'll jump straight back to Ms. Lilia, because I think coming off the points that just been made about how do we modernize our systems, how do we build capacity and build the processes to participate in this current industrial revolution. We're actually seeing a lot of challenges facing MSMEs, facing women entrepreneurs, facing reaching those hard-to-reach communities. What do you see as some of the immediate steps that we need to take as the development community, as the regulatory and the implementation community to address these challenges and to bring solutions that are meaningful, timely, and sustainable?
This is still working, yeah? This is actually a very important question because financial inclusion is a critical question that we are all trying to resolve, and access to finance and access to services by MSMEs and creating opportunities for MSMEs today and for individuals is what Fintech can actually do. It's create more opportunities for them. Also creating more opportunities for example, women and women-led MSMEs, because very often they're the ones who have less capacity to open bank accounts, they have less collateral, they're normally involved in women-led MSMEs, they are normally involved in a type of businesses that present less opportunities for them to have collateral and be able to actually get loans from the banks. One example that I would like to provide is a project that we've been implementing in the Eastern Caribbean together with the ECCB and some of the other partners with the creation of the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation, which has actually shown that MSMEs in general and women MSMEs in particular are a huge financial opportunities for financial institutions. It took us a long time to get this program off the ground because the local financial institutions were not that interested in participating in these schemes. You know, providing support to MSMEs is an expensive business for banks and for partners. You need to find the right financial institutions who will be interested in lending to MSMEs. So Fintech is making this link between the MSMEs and the financial sector and the financial services easier. Our experience highlights that, for example, many women-led MSMEs who rely on a broader range of financial intermediaries, including non-bank financial lenders and credit union, microfinance institutions, and policies for this type of engagements with MSMEs should include these institutions. We should not only rely on traditional commercial banks. The customized financial offerings for MSMEs and for women-led MSMEs may be necessarily including some alternative also delivery channels, also training staff how to provide services to MSMEs, delivering also non-financial services to MSMEs. What we also learned is that a multi-pronged approach is necessary to close the financing gap for MSMEs, and in particular for women-owned MSMEs, such as addressing foundational skills for and various aspects in business environment, business development, legal and regulatory constraints. One thing that I also wanted to mention is the social and cultural norms. Because this is an issue not only for MSME support and MSME finance. This is actually an aspect that is important even for acceptance of digital payments, of actually all fintech innovations. What I see in some of the Caribbean countries is that the cultural acceptance of these innovations is culturally is very difficult for people to accept this innovation. So a big attention has to be paid to like socializing these concepts, explaining, demonstrating the benefits of these new concepts and new ideas, a new way of doing business for people to accept the new technologies. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Yes, and speaking of accepting the new technologies, we do have various pilots that took place. And you spoke about culture, and I think at this point, at this juncture, it'll be good to hear about what this acceptance has been with one of the newer currencies on the block. And if you know anything about Trinidadian parlance, when you name a currency Dcash, right, and how the slogan could not be bring the cash. But let's hear a little bit about that.
So, Mr. Ramratan, all right. There's hope for some of us. There's hope for some of us. Before I talk about Dcash, let me just leverage what Lilia said to say that partial credit guarantee program that we're doing in partnership with the World Bank. We launched that during the pandemic. So far we've done about 200 guarantees, over $15 million issued. A little slower than we would have liked, to be quite honest, but it's starting to pick up. But we've tried to really target women in business, farmers, creatives, youth with the program. So anywhere the loans can be as high as $750,000, the guarantee is 75–80%. But here is the thing. We have for a long time in our region suffered from this plight of excess liquidity in our banking system. Deposits are growing much faster than loans. Even in the pandemic, we saw it. Of course, people couldn't travel, so that's part of the reason. So we've said, it's not just more money, it's finding a mechanism to leverage that money. So the partial credit guarantee is intended to essentially lower the risk and bring persons that Lilia just mentioned, that I just mentioned, the creatives, the women in business and so on, get them over the line in terms of access to credit, financial inclusion. And so that is what that program is about. Again, as we say at the Central Bank all the time, every day we have a choice. We're either going to cross darkness or light a candle. Well, we try to light candles. Sometimes extra work and pain and stress, but that is part of what we sign up for in development in the region. So that is what that program is intended to be. Now, Dcash. So Dcash is our digital currency. It's essentially a digital version of the EC dollar. It allows payments in EC dollars only among the 8 countries of the currency union. We did a pilot a few years ago, and we ended that pilot last year. So just for context, the Caribbean has led the world with respect to central bank digital currencies. The first was Bahamas, then came ECCB, the first currency union in the world, and Jamdex in Jamaica. And somebody asked me at BIS or somewhere, why is the Caribbean leading on this? I said, who feels it knows it. We are at the front lines of climate change. We are at the sharp end of the stick with respect to financial innovation. And we have to take matters into our own hands to try to transform our region. And that's why we have advanced CBDCs. And we saw the benefit, for example, in the Bahamas after Dorian, where they were able to use it to deal with disasters and so on. So the experience at Dcash has been very positive in terms of the technical efficacy, that it works, that it was smooth. I remember one time being in London, I was making a payment to a Rotary Club in one of our islands, and I just picked up the phone and I was able to do it. No issues. And it's settlement within 6 seconds. But we've had challenges as well. One of which is the fact that you cannot assume simply because you have it, people are going to use it. So to Lilia's point, there has to be a real effort in socializing and marketing these initiatives. We found that out. I will tell you, we spent a lot of time focused on financial integrity risk. So that's anti-money laundering, financing of terrorism, AML-CFT protocols. As a central bank and the supervisor of AML-CFT, we had to make sure we took care of that risk. And frankly, we did not spend enough time on marketing early. We did later. And by the time we really got the marketing going, we were ready to close the pilot. But there is a lesson there. We also have to deal with cultural issues. There are persons in our region who still prefer to have physical cash. There are persons who worry that these digital instruments means the tax man is on their doorstep. There are persons who worry that Big Brother is probably watching. There are persons who worry that this could be the mark of the beast, speaking of people of faith. All of those cultural barriers and issues we've had to overcome. And I'm a man of faith, unashamed. So, it is not simply enough to build it. You have to educate around it. And in doing so, you have to take care of safeguards like cybersecurity. Because as you try to build trust, T-R-U-S-T, in the use of these digital payments, like Dcash, you have to make sure you protect people so that you do not undermine the trust that you're trying to build to get people to use it more and more. But I believe the future is very clear. People will ultimately choose their channels of payment based on cost and convenience. And Dcash has given us a lot of rich lessons for us as we think about Dcash 2.0, which is the commercial version of Dcash. So just quickly, we had to change our laws to make sure that legally, Dcash was recognized as legal tender across our currency union. So we went to the ECCB agreement law, and that was changed. No issues, the members changed that. We had to take care of things like the AML-CFT, as I mentioned. As a regulator, we had to make sure there were no issues about. Now, we had to deal with the fact that some people didn't have bank accounts. So what we did was, we had merchant wallets for businesses. We had registered-based wallets for persons with bank accounts or credit union accounts. And we had value-based wallets for persons who do not have a bank account or their financial institution was not yet passed to the pilot. And what we found is that 60% of our users were value-based wallets, which means no holders of bank account. And by the way, we are now addressing this issue of opening a bank account in our region. It is too difficult, and we recognize that, and we have taken steps, and I'll end with this, by taking some amendments to our parliaments. They're now in train. They're beginning to be passed in our parliaments to establish what we call a basic bank account. That means, as a right, a customer must be able to have a bank account open as a right. And that it can only be closed for cause. Cause meaning money laundering or some other predicate offense. That account has to be no minimum balances, so you can't say if you don't have your account drop below that, we're closing it. You can't do that. That account has to be interest bearing. Oh boy, we had a fight with the banks on that one. But we prevailed. Time value of money. If these customers are going to get into the system and advance, you have to give them interest on their money. And by the way, they will graduate. They will graduate and become your customers for loans and other things and so on. And in fact, and I'll end here, PIX. I remember the governor of the Central Bank of Brazil saying that initially there was a challenge with some banks accepting PIX in Brazil. And one of the things they had to show was, if you allow this to go through, low cost, the design, you will be able to offer a lot more services and make money. And that's precisely what has happened in Brazil. So Brazil is quite instructive for us and inspirational in that sense, and we hope we can leverage those lessons. I'll stop there.
Well, you heard it here first. Folks first, interest-bearing accounts. That's right. Yeah. I like the fact that you went on to PIX and the connection to the region, because sometimes we have partnerships that aren't physical partnerships. We have learning, we have experience, and we have knowledge sharing. And something critical that was mentioned earlier is the size of our economies. So we do have to think about scale. And to Dr. Duarte, in Brazil, you actually mandate larger financial institutions to integrate PICs into their operations. But then you do have a clause where smaller institutions aren't mandated to. So I think some explanation of this would be very useful about this demarcation. But also it would be interesting to know why do we give the option to smaller institutions? Because that may in fact be our reality.
Okay, good question. Every time you go to somewhere to talk about PICs, you receive this kind of question because it sounds very, let's say, intrusive, obliging a financial institution to connect to a public infrastructure. But let's go back to the economic theory. The value or utility one can enjoy from a platform is proportional to the number of participants. This applies to cell phone networks, and payment systems, and what else? So the only way to guarantee the users could reap the benefits of the network, the PICs in this case, in the short term was to ensure that a significant proportion of PSPs and their users, and PSPs include fintechs and also traditional banks, and their users would be on board from the day one, okay, the day zero. We also thought that we employed a multi-phase onboarding process that we think about it, and it has a lot of suggestions from the industry. Let's say, why don't you, let's say, include 10% of the users in the first month, and 10% each month, and then in 10 months you're going to have 100%. But so we would risk a mistrust from the public. Imagine an individual try to make a payment, let's say, to experimenting this new payment model and realize that your friend or your father is not connected to the system. Things from the government is mistrusted by principle, by anyone. I'll say it's something that the government, some providers, and so we thought that someone has to think about that a certain person, a certain institution is connected or not connected will be a path to be unsuccessful. Nobody asks somebody whether they receive cash or a merchant whether they receive cards. When you enter a restaurant, you enter a store, you are sure that they will receive card. When you buy pay someone, say, deliver money for someone else, you know that the person will receive cash. Even by law, you have to receive. Another reason to require large PSP to enroll the system was to prevent any initiative that would lead to fragmentation in the market. Luckily, before PICs, we don't have any private fast payment system in Brazil. So we were the first, and I have to say that we prevented the interest of other systems. And so the coexistence of two or more non-interoperable fast payment systems, you have the case of Colombia and Peru that they face this problem, this equilibrium would be inefficient. Having two or more systems in the same jurisdictions, and substantially reduce the benefits of payments infrastructures, possibly also increasing the cost to merchants. This is exactly when you have the competition between two card networks. In fact, the competition does not deliver a lower cost, deliver higher costs. This would also, so this would lead to lower investments by innovation, by fintechs and banks and so on. So this is let's say, the theoretical reasons that led the central bank to, large PSPs will have to connect to the system since the first day. And we decided to, any licensed institution with more than 500,000 users, were obliged to connect it. The other ones were not obliged. But we know that the small ones, they would be connected by their own decisions. And in the end of the day, in day zero, at that time you have 34 institutions that were, by our regulation, obliged to connect. Only one did not connect in the first day, and you have more than 400 connecting by their own choice. Most of them credit unions, fintechs, and so on. So there is a logic of the theoretical logic for this decision, and also we are afraid to fragment the market and create, let's say, a system that was by only with fintechs participating in one infrastructure, and then we had the other one with large banks. We had a history in Brazil of an over-control of payment infrastructure by large banks. Basically, you have the payments infrastructure operated by the central bank, and the private ones, if you see, are held by large banks. And so you have the bank who deals with the merchants, it's connected with the merchants using their acquiring services. They have the individuals and firms as clients, and also controlling the payments infrastructure. So when we start to have a lot of fintechs competing with the banks, we perceive that the banks started to use this payment infrastructure to raise the costs and raise barriers to the fintechs. So I charge. I suppose that I'm the payment infrastructure operator. I charge my controller, which is a large bank, by one monetary unit, and you fintechs, I charge seven times more. Okay, but you are small, then you have to charge you more. Okay, then so this is another reasons that we decided to implement the infrastructure and to oblige the participation and also to keep the operation with the central bank. But I want to use 2 minutes to react on the experience to provide financial service for women and for low-income, for entrepreneur, low-income families, giving our one example of our experience. I would emphasize 2 lessons that we learned. First, 2 experiences that you have. First, the government if the benefits is for the youth, the mother receives. And this creates a bias, a positive bias, that is much more probable that this woman receiving the social benefit receive a proposal for a loan, for any kind of financial service than the father, maybe, the man, okay? And in some cases, in some benefits, the woman can even give a small share of this benefits as a collateral for loans. And the second experience was on credit card receivables. If you read any World Bank MIF report about the Brazilian credit market, you're going to see that among the reasons that the credit to GDP ratio in Brazil is low is that you have the scarcity of good collaterals. There are no good collaterals for small entrepreneurs. And the second is that there is a very high asymmetry of information between incumbent banks and entrants. Okay, in the first case, we created a system. The system is in fact operated by the market. The central bank only regulates some aspects of the system that a merchant can give your future receivables from the credit market schemes as collateral. So if you are someone that, let's say, selling food in the streets, or if you go to the tower market, you can visit this in Brazil, and that you see a lot of handcraft there to being sold. The person who sells using the credit card and the debit card can give the future receivables, the present and the future receivables as collateral for a loan. And this, let's say, leverage a lot the amount of credit provided to small entrepreneurs.
Hi, thanks for that. And thanks for bringing us back to the point. We're talking about financial institutions, we're talking about technology, but it comes back to the point of why are we doing this? We're doing this for the people of our countries, and we're doing this to make better experiences and better lives. So on this point, going back to Ms. Lilia, in terms of the World Bank's activities and your implementation across the region, have you been seeing fintech as an avenue for development partners such as ourselves to implement our strategies for development and implement our targets and make them happen? And what are some of the partnerships you think we could start to forge coming out of today to build greater and more sustainable interventions?
Thank you. As it was already mentioned today, size matters, and the Caribbean is a community of small countries, small size, and the way to go is regional. For the economies of scale, to make sure that services are affordable, because as it was pointed, the larger the market, of course, the lower the cost for the consumers. So what is really important, and a very important strategy for the region, is to implement regional solutions. And we've heard a little bit about this from Timothy. Yeah, I was governor. Okay. So it's very important to build regional platforms, and of course there are different ways of doing it. One is just putting in place regional payment systems and building one regional platform, as the regional platform that the CCB is providing for the Eastern Caribbean countries. Another way is to have individual national payment systems, but which are interoperable, which are based on the same regulatory environments, and which can actually work together, and very good either bilateral or multilateral agreements that allow the interoperability and the exchange of activities across the systems. So the starting point for the regional payment system is, of course, making sure that all of the stakeholders are on board. And there is a range of stakeholders that need to be involved. First of all is the governments, of course. It is, of course, the central banks, the financial institutions, then it's the consumers. It is the private sector, because regardless of who operates the system, sometimes it's publicly operated, but sometimes it is private operated. The private sector has to be, and the public-private partnership, and the private sector has to be part of it. And of course, the consumers have to be taken into account and have to be part of building these regional solutions. For the bilateral or multilateral links, the starting point is to ensure a solid, modern domestic payment system with a common standard and messaging, as I already mentioned, so that they can be interoperable. The World Bank has been actually supporting countries in the region through technical assistance to introduce modern, fast payment system platforms. We've been providing technical assistance through our regional digital program in the Eastern Caribbean. We are providing technical assistance to Belize, to Barbados, to Trinidad and Tobago, and we are planning to actually expand the services on technical assistance on introducing modern and fast payment systems. I would like to mention here 5 common elements that we found that are required in order to increase the success rate of adoption and usage of the payment services in a cross-border context. One is a level playing field for both bank and non-bank payment services providers to participate in the system. It shouldn't be one rule for the big participants and another rule for the small participants, and we heard a little bit about this. So we need to create an inclusive and interoperable ecosystem for everyone. The second conclusion that we made, or lesson, or a common element that we found, is partnership between the public and private sector. And I touched on this a little bit already. The third element, and I mentioned a bit of this as well, is a consumer-centric design. And as we discussed earlier, the awareness and financial literacy. And of course, another important element is the consumer protection. The fourth one is end-use right pricing. Of course, the system has to be able to pay for itself, but it's also very important to make sure that it is right price, so that then the system is being used and it's not overly expensive for consumers. And here it is important to innovate, to achieve public policy objectives such as financial inclusion, and also to, in particular, to include the vulnerable communities. And finally, and as a very important element, is a conducive enabling environment surrounding the modern payment systems in order to increase the chances of success, like comprehensive legal and regulatory framework, solid ICT environment, because if there is no infrastructure, there is nothing. You cannot pay, your cards will not work, your phones will not work, nothing will work if there is not a solid ICT environment and the infrastructure and broadband connections. So let me maybe stop here. Thank you.
I'd like to react to Lilia. I fully agree with you, and let's say pick some of your comments in the context of Brazil. The first is the participation of the private sector in the development and the governance of the system. In the case of Pix, everybody knows it's operated by the central bank. The rules are edited by the central bank, approved by the board of the central bank. But all the discussion about how the system works, the functionalities, the user experiences, security, anti-fraud, anti-money laundering, so on, is discussed with the private sector. We have a lot of examples that the private sector, one, let's say, association of fintechs, of banks, seeks the central bank, says, I have a proposal that's such a proposal that some months later, a few months later, we incorporate this in the system. So we have plenty of working groups, work streams with the private sector. In the end of the day, you see that in those work streams that the regulator doesn't know too little about the market. We are not businessmen; we are regulator men, and almost all the job, let's say, is done by the private sector. You only put this in a more formal language and submit to the board. So this is really important, the participation of the private sector, even when the system is provided by the public sector. The second point is about the economy of scale. It's a technology economy of scale is also present. But my perception is that the minimal viable scale is declining. for the good or for the worse, all these web services of provided by Amazon and other big techs make the viable scale lower. And when we discuss with small fintechs, are you sure that you can compete with a large bank, with no bank, a large fintechs? Is it possible? No, it's possible because if I want more storage, I just call Microsoft. If I want more processing capacity, I call Amazon. So this is for the good, for the worse, but the viable scale is declining. The other point is about that the system has to pay itself. It's good. When we used to have 80% of transaction of PIX, P2P, I think that the banks run some loss providing PIX, but as today we have almost one half of transactions are P2B. In the case of PIX, only person-to-person transactions are free of charge. Any other kind of transaction can be charged. And so I think that today that they have even high, let's say, profits providing PIX to merchants, and also you have much more information on the income of low income of the families and the entrepreneurs than before, because you have a lot of informality in the economy, and the way to measure the informal income is to see how much is processed in the payment in the account of those persons.
By the way, this last point, sorry, on information and data is so critical, because one of the big issues in the Caribbean is the access to data, actually the availability of data. And through this type of transactions, you get a lot of very valuable, important data, and also data about the informal economy, which you didn't have before.
You know, for the last hour, I sit down here trying to figure out how I'm going to ask that question on data. So thanks for that. And thanks for getting us there. So quickly to you, Governor. We are now opening the floor for any questions from the audience. So if you do have one, I'm sure the person next to you will be happy that you quiet me and you ask the question. So please step up. But on that question of data, and your situation has been to pilot the cash across a few countries. You could actually, while we have similar legislation, you could have different infrastructure components, different connectivity, and even the data flowing through the system could be different. So it would be good to hear your thoughts on how we infuse those data processes and across a range of countries as we speak towards regionalism.
Right. So thank you, Mr. Martin. The issue... So this issue of data is so important, super important, because it really has to provide key insights for how we move forward. And so in the case of Dcash, obviously we did it in all 8 countries, so we were able to get data from all the countries. But a key part of this enterprise is really the public infrastructure that was mentioned by Lilia, the provision of public infrastructure, which is what Brazil has done through the Central Bank with PIX, which is what we did with Dcash, but which is what we do even with the ACH, the Automated Clearing House, in many of our countries, where it's owned between the central bank and the commercial banks. And those, again, provide us with data sources for us to marshal the data and for us to really better make sense of what is going on there. I will say, as we think Caribbean-wide about how fintech could impact the region, we have to do work on regulatory standards. Some kind of harmonization of regulatory standards. So it's easy, relatively easy in the currency union, where it's one law, payment systems law, which the World Bank, through a product with the World Bank, we are modernizing. But as you move, so even when I talk about caps earlier, as you move beyond the currency union and you get into Barbados, and everybody had a different payment law. And we have to be able to harmonize. If not, uniform is what we do in the currency union. All 8, same law, one regulator, that's uniform. At the very minimum, we now have to harmonize so that the standards are clear and they are predictable to allow us to be able to do what we want to do. One of the biggest challenges with payment system and fintechs in the world is fragmentation. So even if you go to Europe, as advanced as Europe is, you will still find that their payment systems, individual payments, are fragmented. And that adds costs, that adds time to transaction. And obviously some of it is based on trust or lack thereof. So I'm saying that to say, a key focus now is not just for us to take the next step with fintech in the region, is for us to harmonize the regulatory standards across the region. That means also, and that was mentioned earlier on, standards around interoperability. So regardless of the payment system you have, whether it is Visa, whether you're using Dcash, whether you're using Jamdex, whatever you're using, these payment systems need to be interoperable. And who has to set that? There has to be a governance around that. That means that whoever is coming in, to the, Dr. Duarte's comment, whoever is coming in has to, yes, the barriers to entry have been lowered for good or bad or worse, but you have to make sure you have interoperability so that the customer is not dealing with the sharp end of these frictions and the costs associated with that. So that is an important point we have to make. We have to push on interoperability, we have to push on the regulatory standards, and we have to continue to push on financial consumer protection. Because as we try to build momentum and build the use of these digital tools, we are aware of scams, for example, in the region. And every time it is so painful. You tell people, get on the digital tools, less physical cash for multiple benefits for the economy. You tell them you want them to become more, not just savers, but investors. Because in the United States, 3 in 5 persons are invested in the stock market and make income and generate wealth from that. In the currency unit, it's 1 in 25, 4%. How do we get to 20% in 10 years? That's the moonshot goal for us with wealth creation in the currency union. But then you get a scam where somebody loses money, and that sets us back because people then, it undermines trust. So we have to do a lot of education. And unfortunately, I digressed a little bit, but I wanted to say, unfortunately, the crypto market, and I'm not, whether you're for or against cryptos, has hurt us in the sense that some people have gone into those and made investments. Some of them have made a little money. Some of them have lost money. But the mentality now is I have to make 2x and 3x and 5x. So with that mentality, when you bring them back to a normal market and you say, let's do a mutual fund, let's do a balanced fund, where you have a mix of stocks and bonds, and you can get, a reasonable return, whether it's 6, 7, 10%, or whatever. Only that. Because they're now conditioned in their mind to think 2x, 3x. So you have a lot of education to do. And unfortunately, some of the people who are invested in these things are not sufficiently digitally and financially literate and are getting hurt. So as we gather the data, we have to also use it to target these audiences. This is where I'm going with that. To make sure that we bring the right messages to them and also help them in their journey with the adoption of fintech, whatever the product is and whatever channels they choose to use. And I'll stop there.
Thanks for that. And on the important point about making sure we help people, there's one, we have to protect people as we infuse fintech into activities. But we could also see fintech as our ability to help us help people faster. Across the world, we've seen a lot of humanitarian crises. Right here in the Caribbean, every year between June to November, we're praying, but at the same time, we're trying to prepare for in case there's an environmental crisis. I think in this line, I would like to find out if from the World Bank, there's been any use of fintech in this area for crisis response, to look at economic and social shocks, and if that information could be transfused to help, like ECCB, be part of the response mechanism going forward.
Yeah, very good question, because all of us living in the Caribbean, we know that disaster preparedness and resilience is the name of the game in the Caribbean. And as we've seen with, for example, last year's Hurricane Beryl, some countries that were severely affected received very quickly the payouts from insurance. They were like assistance from the World Bank in Grenada through the CADDO. So the government received the resources very quickly, but then it was a real struggle to transfer these resources to the individual people who really needed the assistance. And here is where fintech is so important, because, and here where financial inclusion is very important, because if the person doesn't have an account, getting cash out is very difficult in these critical environments. It's very beneficial to have people part of the system where you can just make the transfer right away. But it's also important to have all the system, the social protection systems prepared. You need to have the lists. You need to have the actually databases to be able to identify the beneficiaries very quickly, and then of course to transfer the resources to the beneficiaries. There is quite a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. The World Bank is working with the countries, not only the World Bank, I know CDB is working with the countries on improving the social registries and social adaptive social protection systems. But also on from security difficulties, connectivity difficulties. So being able to make the transfers electronically and not needing to make cash transactions makes it possible to provide assistance to people in a real time. But also I remember I was talking to one of the beneficiaries last year who said, for their personal protection, it is actually better to have the electronic money, so to say, rather than cash. Because the lady who I was talking to, she said, they know, people around know I'm receiving this support. They know more or less the date when I receive this support. The next day, I can have someone at my door just trying to steal this money, to take this money from you. When it's electronic, it cannot be stolen. So I only go and take as much money as I need to pay for whatever, for the books, for my children when I need it. So it's actually a security protection also for people in these difficult environments. So what is important is to use fintech to make the life of people easier and to improve the quality of services that they receive. Thank you.
Just to say that that last point about security cannot be overemphasized. And we've always said, part of our, and we know we have a crime and security challenge in our region. Part of how we harden the financial system against crime is to more use of digital tools, yes, less use of physical tools. And if somebody is resisting using digital tools, you have to ask why. I'll leave that there. You have to ask why. But we absolutely believe it is. I say it all the time. A small business person, an entrepreneur, woman or man, youth, young person, in any part of our region, including in a rural community, ought to be able to operate a business at any time of day, and particularly night, without fear of being robbed. And clearly, collecting physical cash provides an opportunity for crime. And we want them to use these digital tools, their phones, their point-of-sale systems, to be able to reduce that, to give both themselves and the customer a safer experience and a perception of, of safety. And that is a real issue, real people right now in our region. So again, we talk about helping people with faster, safer, cheaper payments and transfers and remittances, but there's also the safety issue as we deal with crime. So I just wanted to underscore the point you made there, Lily. I'll leave it there. I don't know if we have a question.
One comment about security. You are in Latin America and the Caribbean, that you share a lot of these problems with security. It's not only in Haiti that it's dangerous to move cash and to transport cash over the territory. In Brazil, it's very large, and sometimes the central bank provides cash in 10 different cities, and you have the private banks, the large private banks providing cash in other cities. But in many situations, for medium and small cities, you have to transport cash for 100, 200, 300 kilometers. And this is very dangerous, that the banks used to face a lot of losses with assaults in the roads. And also, there is a specific crime in Brazil that you call named Saidinha, that someone is leaving the ATM, is leaving the bank branch, and then someone on the corner tried to steal you. And so, and this is the PIGs managed to reduce a lot this kind of crime of someone assaulting or this card or transporting, I don't know how it's in English, cash. And also reduce the cost for banks and also for companies, because if you run a large company, for example, a supermarket in a medium city, you have to every day to collect the cash you receive it and transport it to a bank. And if there isn't a large bank in the city, you have to take it to the nearest city with a bank branch. But this is the good part. The bad part, that maybe you created let's say the digitalization of the financial system. You created other crimes or other kind of private using the digital illiteracy of the people. You have the people used to use cash to everything. Okay, I know the cash is on my pocket, it's at home, and now you have a lot of scams. People getting let's say being a victim of scams, and the impersonation using mostly of the case using social media. And everybody in Brazil use WhatsApp or other kind of social media platform, and then this kind of crime using social media and fast payments or digital payments linked to this. It's a devil combination. It's between social media and digital payments. It's something that you have to work on. The central bank has worked on to reduce digital illiteracy. We have a lot of initiatives to provide information to individuals, to the citizens, and so on. But it's something that will take a lot of effort from us.
Yeah, I see we have one question.
Thank you. First, let me commend the panel. This is an excellent session, and I think in many ways there are lessons for the small man, the entrepreneur, as well as for institutions like CDB. Because some of what we heard today in terms of intra-regional financial inclusion and financial activity and regional payment systems can also work in a way when they link to other payment systems. There's Central American payment system as well as the African payment system, and there are opportunities for that to be driven by what the work that has started. And I just wanted to make a point as well as ask the governor a question, because the region has had two previous intra-regional payment systems that were attempted back in the 1970s and 1980s. There was the international payment system, and then there was the CARICOM, multilateral trade facility, exactly, that failed around 1984. We won't get into why it failed, but it had to do with the fact that countries were involved. In this case, central banks are involved. And I wondered to what extent also part of the financial literacy and digital literacy around financial inclusion and the payment system can also help persons to understand the benefits of using central banks, you know, within the context. In other words, what happened in the past wouldn't happen again, and central banks are much better stewards of digital infrastructure, and therefore that would help to build trust, and so on. The other point I had was a comment in relation to what Lilia mentioned about Haiti. You know, Haiti is an interesting case. Haiti has a population of about 11.4 million, 4 million people of whom live outside of Haiti. They have 56% of Haitians don't have access to the financial system. 39% use the internet, but 67% of them have access to a cell phone. Imagine the opportunities there and what lessons we can learn as well for other regions. And a lot of that happened post-2010 earthquake in India. So post-disaster, there was a lot of that growth. And I wondered whether the panel could also comment on the utility of part of the education being the use of digital solutions and fintech as part of our Caribbean experience in terms of not only pre-disaster, the efficiencies, the costs, etc., but also post-disaster and what lessons we can have, you know, especially from Brazil's experience. We heard yesterday, I think it was the day before, about how Brazil has managed to keep a reserve for certain reasons because of the impacts from global trade issues or other shocks. And I wondered whether as well the contributor from Brazil can also, Ms. Duarte, can also comment on that in terms of Brazil being a lesson for the region in that regard. I know 3 questions, but...
No, I think that's perfect. So what we could do is start from Dr. Duarte, come down, and in responding to those questions, each panelist could give the wrap-up remarks. Yes.
Sorry, I had to check my cell phone, then I lost your question for me, sorry. Okay.
The question was, how can Brazil, Brazil seems to be doing a few unique things I mentioned that we heard a few days ago, having the reserve in any event of any global shocks, etc. I don't know if you were here in that panel, but also the utility of PICS, being able to have the level of trust that it has and being able to market that so that for the region as part of our literacy. So here's a good example next door. For instance, why can't Guyana learn from that and eventually be able to have its own PICS equivalent and learn from Brazil's experience?
Okay,
How willing are
good,
you to
good,
share?
I get it. Okay, then we have some initiatives in the central bank to share our experience, not only in this kind of seminars, but in something much more elaborated with multiple meetings with the technical teams and so on. So this is something that we have done in the last 2 years. And in the first years after we launched PICS, we had a lot of restrictions to receive, let's say, delegations from other countries and to have long visits. But now we are starting to do this. We have received some African countries in the central bank, and so we are very open to share our let's say, experience to talk about the technology behind PICS, the regulation, the deeply, and so on and so forth. This is the kind of, let's say, a contribution that we can give for the other countries. I think a second point is that we are sometimes question that is it possible, let's say, to copy the codes of the PICS system to other countries and so something like that. It's not possible because, in fact, PICS was developed by the central bank, but we use a lot of outsourced softwares and systems. So the central bank is responsible for the integration of the system and the operation, but in fact rely on many other systems provided by Microsoft and other IT vendors. So it's not possible just to copy and translate to other countries, but we can share, let's say, how the technological architecture was designed and was operated and so on. A third maybe answer is about connecting PIX with other systems. It's something that we haven't deserved a lot of efforts up to now, because this is a very interesting point that if you, all cross-border retail transactions in Brazil in 1 year corresponds to the number of retail payment transactions in 3 or 4 hours, domestic transactions. And so the dimension of cross-border for Brazil, retail, in terms of number of transactions, low value cross-border transaction, is very small compared to the domestic transactions. So cross-border transactions using PIX, it's not one priority of the central bank. But we have that, we know that from the market that there are some companies that use PIX as the first or the last leg of a cross-border transaction. So if you I will not name the company, but you probably know that 90% of the cross-border remittances in this company, is a leader of the market, starts with a PIX transaction. So you make suppose that you're gonna have to send $1,000 to elsewhere, anywhere, then you make a domestic transfer using PIX, and so to the account of this company, and then this company make the cross-border leg. And the other way around also. If someone sends you some money from abroad, then once they receive the messaging, that if they know your PIX alias, then they made the last leg of the transaction use employee PIX. So this is the way that PIX has reduced the cost and improved the speed of cross-border transactions. Not connecting PIX to other systems. We know that it's very complex to create a governance of the interlinkage of two payment systems. There are a lot of reports on the BIS and so on. But in the case of Brazil, it's not a priority. But I have to recognize that when you move to the Caribbean, it comes as a priority, because you have to, the integration of the countries in the region is one factor, maybe it's one factor. The other factor is that if you integrate the system, you have some gains of scale. I use all that, I spend all the time, sorry.
No, very quickly, a very good point about access to a cell phone and using the cell phone as a mean of transactions. In this case, you need to have a very good partnership with the private sector, with the operators of the cell services. That's why, as I mentioned before, this public-private partnership is very important. And you need to have willing partners on the private sector side, because if you have monopolists who are not interested in, because they are comfortable with what they are doing today, they are not interested in innovating because this is a headache for them, they're already comfortable with what they have today, it's very difficult to penetrate situations like that. Then you try to look for new players. Yeah, the ones who still want to grow and want to have new opportunities. So it's not always that easy.
Right, so I know we're out of time, so what I'll tell you, Dr. Boyce, is that CAPS is not new, but it's next. I'm channeling the spoken word yesterday by Christelle, for those of you who remember the opening ceremony. I'll leave it there, we could speak in the break. I'll end with something I say all the time. It's sort of a little mantra. As a region, we cannot change our history, and we cannot change our geography, but we can elevate our development trajectory through innovation and collective action. What do I mean? We cannot change our history of slavery and colonialism. That's the reality. We can't change our geography that we're some of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. But what we can change and must change is our development trajectory through innovation, fintech, and collective action. The partnerships that we've talked about today, not just within governments and central banks and development banks, but with the private sector. And that is what we must actually aim to do with a great sense of urgency. So I want to thank CDB again for this. We want to bring this forward because we really see the potential benefits for the region if we're able to fully integrate fintech in our development agenda.
Right. So let me thank our panelists. I think it was a great discussion. I do think they had an issue with the time. They forgot to change it back to Barbados time. So we should have an hour to go. But the important message I think I'll leave us with is not only what we do, it's how we do it, how we respond, how we adopt, and how we adapt. Thank you.
Thank you.